Look at the pre-made meals.
Wow, wait, what is that?
The pork katsu sandwiches.
Jeez, look at that.
Bro, look at that.
That looks...
Look at the selection
Oh,
for
wow,
the
look at
listeners.
that. Beautiful.
So here's the sushi kits. Look at the sushi kits. These sushi kits, nigiri platters, would cost $100+ in America. You buy them in Japan Costco for $20.
Oh, man.
Look at that.
That is mad.
Anybody that uses smartphones, if it's more than 2 taps, it's never going to happen. And that's basically to open a Telegram secret chat. You got to do like 4 or 5 times, and there's all these
really
rules.
want
like,
it, you know.
You got
you got to get to those taps. Yeah,
you got to really want it. For people wondering, NIA never got clapped because we've never monetized it. We made zero.
We kept it free and independent.
If you look at the chart, the revenue's been consistent at 0.
Well, it's been consistently negative. That's
right, because we pay for the production. So for people who don't know, Alice Cooper signed a $60 million deal with Spotify in 2020. Here's the crazy thing. Dude, she was unemployed in 2018.
It's
unemployed.
Incredible. Amazing story.
She's super
Good for
talented
her,
though. She is super talented, by the way. She said she spent 10 hours an episode editing, and like when she was coming up, like Call Her Daddy, people don't know. It started with her and a co-host, Sophia. I forgot Sophia's last name, but
no, I forgot.
But anyways, it was like locker room talk for girls. That was the pitch, right? If you don't know about Alice Cooper, Google this, Gluck Gluck 9000. That's what she became famous for. I'm not going to say anything more. Google that. But then now she does celebrity interviews.
All right, welcome to another episode of No Investment Advice. You got Trunk fan Bilal Zaidi here. What's going on, Trunk? Packed week. Lots to talk about.
It's end of the summer. And we got to get into the big news that dropped. A very NIA piece of news dropped this morning, Tuesday morning.
Straight to meme of the week.
The Oasis reunion after 15 years. I mean, we talked about Oasis with George Mack a couple episodes ago. Jack Butcher brings up Oasis. You guys, obviously, British cats. You got to throw some love to Oasis. Actually, I saw this headline. Someone said that the Oasis, Liam and Noel Gallagher, are the most famous brothers in England. Is that true?
Probably up there. I'm trying to think who would be more famous. You got any idea? I don't think there is. You're right.
No, that's what I mean. That's why I'm asking you. Is there anyone more famous than these guys as brothers? And they might be some of the most famous. There might be like some British footballers that are like
brothers, you know, that everyone, like Phil and Gary Neville, pretty famous
in
the UK, but not globally as much. These guys are not global.
But dude, Gallagher's are bigger than the Nevilles.
No, you're right. Oasis, because Oasis is Oasis.
Well, so there you go. They are the biggest brothers. They are the biggest brothers.
Maybe Jamie and Skepta as well for the 2 rappers, but that's another. They're more recent. But no, I agree. No, these guys.
Well,
are
here's the
massive,
meme,
obviously.
right? The joke was on Monday, they teased something on their Twitter account, their X account. It just said the date for today. It said 08/27/2024. People were like, oh, they're teasing a comeback tour, reunion tour. But then everybody started posting this meme of maybe, maybe you're going to be the one that saves it. So this meme is hysterical, man.
You want to describe it for the people who are listening?
Yeah,
only?
It's one of those Who Wants to Be a Millionaire game show memes. And it just says maybe, and then he has to pick the right answer. And the right answer is A, you're going to be the one that saves me. But then I don't know, man, maybe I just want to fly, which is answer C, sounds kind of good. Answer B is I don't really want to know. Yeah, that's pretty good. But anyways, man, would you go to this show?
Oh, yeah, if I could. And I remember when we did that George Mack episode recently, there was someone in the comments being like, this is the most mediocre music, or like, I can't believe you guys did a whole segment on this average band, and it's so funny, man. Or the other time,
band,
you know, we get like all sorts of comments, and it never really gets to me. But the one I will say, when I jokingly said I was listening to Chris Brown in the sauna, do you remember this when it was me and you?
Yeah.
And I was obviously messing around. It's like a stupid song. And this guy was like, oh, Bilal has the worst taste in music. And it's like, oh, you're coming at my music taste is hard.
Bilal's playlist so is Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and there then Wonderwall.
Yeah. Maybe I should make a playlist like
Dude,
the worst playlist.
Which is kind of fire, man.
I mean, look, if you don't take yourself too seriously, you can listen to any music you like, you know. Spice Girls, throw that in there in the morning for a sing-along, you know. A few Craig David, 7 Days. You just got to play happy music.
Dude,
you know
we've actually talked about Craig David a lot, man. He was the king, man.
Oh yeah. Also, for people in London, there was a Notting Hill Carnival this weekend. Do you know about this? It's the longest.
No, tell me.
I think it's the biggest street party in Europe or something like that, and it's the Jamaican influenced Notting Hill Carnival. So it's normally a whole
Carnival.
weekend.
Like
Carnival.
Yeah,
exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But we can't say words in other languages in England, so we just anglicize it. But no, and Craig David was there, and he just turned up and started singing and doing stuff with a random musician. There were a lot of cool videos coming out. It's always, I'm assuming you've never been, but it's a lot of fun every year. You got to get a little jerk chicken, a little red stripe going. It's a good time.
Well, red stripe's the beer, the Brazilian.
Yeah, red stripe's the Jamaican beer. Yeah,
Jamaican. Well, actually, they have what you're describing. They have a really big one in Toronto that goes ham every year.
It must be pretty similar, yeah. Because
a lot of Caribbean cats people end up in Toronto.
Yeah, it's funny. Those videos you see. We'll get to the topics in a second, but in Toronto when they sound, the slang is very similar to London, but they've got that Toronto accent. It's the most ridiculous accent, bro.
What's like, a Toronto accent?
My guy, like that. They got this funny.
You mean the Canadian, like the Canadian Toronto stereotype? One. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, let's get to the topics. We've already lost, Mr. Beast would not be happy with retention here, but let's get on to what's going on. We got Telegram, the founder of Telegram, Pavel Durov, was arrested at Paris airport. We're going to break that down, what we know, what we don't know. Then we're going to talk about podcast acquisitions. Alex Cooper from Caller Daddy has just signed a $125 million deal with SiriusXM, and Travis Kelce and his brother have signed a $100 million deal with Wondery. If you guys remember, we covered this a few years ago with Rogan signing to Spotify, Caller Daddy. It seems like there's like a second wave. It's like the renewals are coming now.
Because there's also like a bit of a valley where the whole industry got clapped. So we'll talk about, for people wondering, NIA never got clapped because we've never monetized it. We made zero.
We kept it free and independent.
If you look at the chart, the revenue's been consistent at zero.
Well, it's been consistently negative. That's
right, because we pay for the production. Okay, you're right. But it's been consistent. There's been no ups and downs.
That's it. That's consistency is key in life. So there we go. So we got Oasis reunion tour. Maybe there's a little bit to talk. We kind of just covered it there, but if there's anything else you got on that. And then very NIA topic, Costco is opening in Japan, apparently.
No, they have 32 locations.
They already have
Okinawa.
Okinawa. Okay. The Hawaii of Japan.
No, but the Hawaii of Japan. Oh, we could talk about that, right?
I'll say where I'm right now. I'm at my basically in-laws' place. There, my girlfriend is half Japanese. Her family's from Okinawa, that side. So we got a connection. You can see behind me right now for people. This is authentic Japanese
artwork.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I don't know what's going on there. Very cool. Anyway, and then we got so I think we'll stick to those four for now. We did have other stuff, but we probably will not get to it this week. So why don't we talk about Telegram first? I think that was the most pressing stuff. What is going on? You've been covering this.
I've done zero coverage, but I've been following it. Well, tell me what you know. You mentioned you was arrested at
I just saw the headline. I saw a couple memes basically showing. I actually watched that interview with him. Was it on Lex or something? There was a pretty Tucker. I actually watched that one. It was quite interesting to hear his whole backstory and everything. So all I saw was the headline.
Why don't I walk through the following?
Go for it.
I'll give some top levels of what's happened. Up to date Tuesday morning where we are with his arrest. Then I'll talk about him personally, how he built Telegram, and then we'll talk about where Telegram falls in the suite of apps. Like we obviously use Telegram for our NIA channel. I know some listeners are in there. We're not very active there, but that's part of the product that they offer. How does Telegram fit into the messaging universe? WhatsApp, Signal, iMessage. Why its approach to encryption actually may have led to Pavel Durov's arrest. It's actually quite interesting.
Okay, that's great.
And then that should kind of wrap up with any loose questions. But so where we are right now. So he had a warrant out for the French authorities had some type of warrant out for him since July. They had opened in an investigation, but the unit that opened the investigation was recently launched, and people looked at it and were like, this looks like is it politically motivated? Is it B, related to, you know how the EU, we've talked about how they've all these new laws, Digital Services Act laws around user data, user privacy. And the joke that we've been having, what's our joke about Europe and regulation? Like, instead of building the next big tech company, they're just trying to regulate themselves into relevance, right? Well, like, is that kind of what we've discussed?
No, I think, yeah, we've talked about just the more heavy-handed approach to regulation there.
Right, in the EU. And obviously, anybody that's ever visited or been in EU and visited a website, you know what this is. The general data, was that GDPR? Yeah, you got to accept all the cookies, right? Everybody knows that.
I don't
that's
say
like,
the G word anymore after dealing with it. With all
You've been dealing with it so much, right?
Yeah.
So people are asking what's going on. He was arrested over the weekend. There's no official communication until yesterday, which was Monday. They released the charges against him. Oh no, it might not even be in the charges. It's like the scope of the investigation. They're basically saying that as the owner of Telegram, which has almost 1 billion users, he is complicit in various crimes that are taking place on the platform because he and his team, which we will discuss, only 30 people, full-time, 30 to 50 full-time employees. Tucker, on the Tucker Carlson podcast, he said he had 30 full-time employees. In a Financial Times interview, he said he had 50. I don't know, maybe he meant like, people that are active in the company is less than 50. It's crazy.
I'm assuming not many of those people are working on government relations.
Exactly, right?
Or maybe even regulations in general, I don't know.
Or they don't have a big trust and safety team, which is kind of the point here.
Okay.
And so I think the official letter from the French government or the judiciary that released this is about, I think, 15 or 16 points. But it was so broad. It was like, what happens on any communication platform? What happens on the telephone networks? What happens on the internet is drug trafficking happening, human trafficking happens. Unfortunately, a lot of child pornography happens, sexual harassment happens. And this happens on any communication medium, right? It's just not just Telegram. It's not just WhatsApp. It's Facebook. It's Instagram. It's X. It's the telephone networks. It's the email services. So the kind of conundrum here, and there are a lot of pieces at play, is like, well, are you arresting someone that runs this platform? And then people are like, okay, well, this actually means that you could probably arrest literally like the CEO of a telecom company, the CEO of Mark Zuckerberg, right? It's like, how doesn't this apply to Zuck? And I mean, the quick answer is that he has a very large trust and safety team, right? They spend about $5 billion a year. And even though X has reduced,
I think a lot of it is just perception of, we care about this enough to have a team. We're taking this seriously. We're trying our best, sort of thing. But they've also had varying levels of that over the years, especially Facebook, right? But yeah, anyway, but if you're comparing a 30-person team to 50,000 or whatever they've got,
But that's why there's so many elements here to tease out, right? There's and then people are like, oh, this is a free speech issue, right? That gets brought into it now. So the first issue we just touched on is, how should the owner of this platform or the people running it, how liable are they, right? This has been a huge question over the past decade, particularly on the internet, because of how quickly you can disseminate information. Now, a lot of the smartest tech people I saw viewed this as this is quite escalatory, right? It's one thing for the government to open an investigation into a company. They've done it to every major social network in North America, for example. And then there's another thing to actually arrest the individual, right? The person at the top of this company. Now, there's the other element that gets brought in is a free speech part, because Telegram and Pavel Durov, you mentioned in the Tucker Carlson interview, he has this position of kind of anti-censorship, very light touch moderation, and now we can talk about his past and why this is relevant. So just to tie the loose end of where we are on Tuesday, by the law of French, the way that they conduct these investigations, he should be released tomorrow unless they charge him with a crime, which a lot of people are asking for. Is like, okay, if he's done something directly, not just being the owner of this platform, what is the direct implication of the crime? Because right now it looks like they're just charging for owning this platform, and then things are happening on that platform that that the French government is unhappy about. And so let's give a little bit of background on Pavel Durov. So Pavel Durov, he's the same age as Mark Zuckerberg. So, and he is considered for a long time. He was considered Russia's Mark Zuckerberg because he had launched a social networking site in Russia called VK. Now, if you read about the history of VK, he basically, around 2014, when Russia started really making moves into Ukraine, like a decade ago, right? When this conflict really started happening with Russia and Ukraine, he would not censor anti-Russian government kind of groups or like channels, the equivalent of like a Facebook group, right? And effectively, that got him on the wrong side of the Russian government, and he basically had to give up the social networking platform. Like he was forced to sell it to somebody that was very close to Vladimir Putin. And now this raises a lot of questions because there's so much uncertainty of his relationship with Russia, because the reality is that if you look at 2014, he had to give up his social networking website. It'd be as if in 2014, the US government forced Mark Zuckerberg to sell Facebook to, I guess at the time it was a Democratic, it was the Obama administration. He had to sell it to somebody close to Obama. That's like the equivalent of what happened in 2014 to Pavel Durov. So he left Russia and was basically in exile at that point because he risked arrest within the government, within the country. So he left. I think he became a citizen of UAE. And in the Tucker Carlson podcast, he talked about he was bouncing around the world, seeing where he could settle. Like I think he went to Singapore, he went to San Francisco. In San Francisco, he said that somebody from the FBI tried to backdoor themselves into Telegram, and he's like, maybe this isn't the safest place for me to be. And then he ended up with UAE, and he actually got a French citizenship, like an honorary French citizenship, which makes this whole thing crazy. It's like 3
like
years
those
ago.
honorary PhDs or
exactly,
you know,
right from a school.
Yeah.
So he actually got like this crazy, like this French citizenship they don't give to very many people. It's like a special one, I guess, for at the time 3 years ago. They're like, oh, let's give it to Pavel Durov. Like, he's got this incredible background. But then he launched Telegram after he had to give up VK. Launched it with his brother. And the thesis behind Telegram was born from him having to give up VK, right? He's like, he wants to build a small team, keep it privately owned, and like not have a centralized government censorship or somebody that can push the thumb on him because of what had happened with VK. So that was his stance with Telegram when they launched it. So that's grown now from 0 to 1 billion users. And 30 to 50 full-time employees, very light touch, as he said. And let's pause there. And Bilal, what are your thoughts so far of this setup?
No, that's great background. I think for me, I'm still not 100% sure. Not, obviously not following this super closely. Like you said, like what's the difference between what he's done versus others? It sounds like mostly it's just in regards to not having a trust and safety team, and there's maybe more of that activity happening on there. I don't know if that's provable or not, but from their investigation, is more happening on there, and it seems like they're not trying to follow the rules around clamping down on anti-terrorism, anti-XYZ laws, essentially, or not playing along. It just, that's kind of where I still have a question.
No, you nailed it. So let's get into the crux of it, right? Let's talk about the encryption. So this is the big part. Again, there's so many moving parts to this. Is France like kneecapping its tech industry? Like imagine being a founder in France for a social product now. You're gonna be like, oh my God, no, but seriously, you're going to arrest like me for building this platform? Listen, I'm not defending any of the stuff you talked about, but that's just the reality of any communications platform, right? Really bad stuff. Listen, if we shut down Telegram tomorrow, guess what? Terrorists and human traffickers are going to find ways to communicate through their networks, right? So the question then becomes exactly to your point, is like you're trying to wonder, why is it that Telegram is getting the squeeze? And you kind of mentioned something earlier. You kind of got to the thrust of it, which is Facebook has a massive trust and safety team, right? $5 billion a year, tens of thousands of moderators. And, a lot of it's quite controversial. There's two controversies with Facebook's moderation. Are they pushing their thumb on the scale? Yesterday, Mark Zuckerberg wrote a letter to the US government saying that he think he was pressured by the Biden administration over COVID jokes, and he thought it was a mistake for them to have answered those requests to take them down. So this is all happening, right? There's a lot of moving pieces here. The second part of Facebook
that
moderation,
whole conversation again. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, here, like the second part of moderations that also becomes quite controversial is human moderations of social networks, right? It's like awful. It's like, Bilal, when you started working at Google, you mentioned there's something called the bin. Can you tell us what that is?
Yeah, the bin was, a lot of people did it, including Sheryl Sandberg, who became the head of Facebook,
CEO of Facebook.
CEO of Facebook, yeah, but basically like running it alongside Mark Zuckerberg. And they would basically have to, you open a screen and it would be content or ad moderation in that case. So it would be something would come on the screen, it's on the gray area of policy, and a human would physically be like, oh, I'm going to press yes or no based on the policy that I've learned. So it's like reviews. It's pretty ridiculous.
Well, here's the thing. Some of the most awful shit you could possibly imagine is coming through.
And I would say for that it was ads, so it was just text, so it's not that bad. But like for the people that did YouTube, for example, they would see some really
just
tough stuff.
Terrible, right?
And by that point, I think way in the future, they had to outsource that to specialist teams because it's, you can't just put a random
markets, making $2 an hour. Yeah. If you look into the moderation stuff, it's awful. It is like the worst stuff in human. It's the worst stuff. Imagine
anyone can upload at any moment, and I guess maybe by this point there are some automated visual. They've probably got some AI stuff that pre-vet stuff and puts it in a cube. But you're right, like it's the sort of stuff we don't think about. That someone kind of has to do it, right? And it's not nice, but there's someone who's going to have to do that as well.
Right.
So.
And the reason I brought that up, there's these sides of the moderation game, right? It's like it's necessary. I do think some moderation is necessary. I'm not one of the mind of like it's a complete free for all, and but then it's a continuum, right? This is why this debate gets so heated. Is like how much moderation should you have? And it's very clear that people believe this is escalatory because France is basically saying, okay, it's one thing we're gonna fine you if you don't moderate, but now we're going to arrest the owner of these platforms. I mean, that's just going to put a chill on any type of a tech innovation in France. I think it's not great for France's look in terms of, because even yesterday, Emmanuel Macron had to put out a tweet. He's like, he basically said that, there's a lot of talk around Pavel Durov, and he's like, this is not a political thing. He's like, this is judiciary. He's like, I think France was surprised at the kind of the blowback they were getting, because honestly, they weren't even really explaining like what
that's
they were doing.
The key here is like they could easily, I'm sure they will at some point explain this is what's happening. It's not, you can't build a social network, you can't do XYZ because look, we've got Facebook operating here, WhatsApp, etc. This is specific to him because he did XYZ, but they can't say that right now. So I think you're right. That clarification would help a lot with the.
Well, they're going to have to do it in the next 24 hours because he's going to have to be released from detention unless they really throw the book at him. And the other thing that I forgot to mention regarding the bullet point list of what they're investigating him for is a lot of it is around cryptography. And they basically, one of the bullet points was he doesn't have a license to do cryptography, which. There is no license to do
I was going to say, who? It's like your CFA dues are due here. What the hell? I don't even know what that means.
Who am I paying to do it's math. It's like, but this is what I mean. That's why people
and
are
he's like one of the leading people in that space, right? Like he knows that stuff very well, and the signal guy. But that's an interesting.
But let's get to the encryption though. This will answer your earlier question since we got kind of bogged down in the moderation. Specifically, you will see a lot in the media that Telegram is fully encrypted. It is not. The vast majority of chats on Telegram are unencrypted. And the way encryption works, and Bilal, tell me if this sounds correct from what your knowledge. When you hear encryption, what you really want to hear, if you care about privacy and no one snooping on you, is end-to-end encryption. That's E2E. And what end-to-end encryption means is that the only people that can see the source of the communication are the two people on the ends of that exchange, right? So, give you an example. iMessage, WhatsApp, and Signal have end-to-end encryption. And let's just use an example. If I send Bilal a very banger meme on iMessage. It's going to go through Apple-owned servers, but it's encrypted while it's in their server. Like they can't tell you what is on there. But then it comes with the Bilal side. He has a key for it. He gets to see it. And do you remember a couple of years ago, 2016, there's a terrorist attack, and the FBI wanted Apple to kind of hard fork or backdoor one of the phones, the terrorist's phone. And they wanted Apple and Tim Cook to create a backdoor to find what was on the phone. And Tim Cook basically said, we're not going to do that. And that was kind of his privacy stance. Because the position at the time, and people that agreed with him, was that the ability for government abuse of this power to look and snoop, as we were shown by Edward Snowden, right? We saw what the NSA was doing with all these platforms, is that people are falling on that side. It's like, you know what? Would rather have, even if we're allowing bad things to happen in the dark, the trade-off is, do you want full government power to snoop? That's essentially the full extremes of these trade-offs. And the reality is you actually do have to pick how you fall on that continuum. And I mean, in my mind, I'm kind of more scared of government overreach, of having full visibility into everything, than I am of honestly also awful stuff happening. But governments perpetrate the worst stuff in the world. That's the whole point, right? It's like, if you look through human history, it's the state and the power of the state which are doing by pure numbers, the worst crimes.
Yeah, even now, you look at wars and millions of people being impacted by stuff, right?
So like, it's easy.
But it also doesn't have to be either or, I guess. There can be a middle ground, I guess. And so I think what you brought up there was, you also talked about like moderation, like it kind of overlaps with content moderation as well on social networks, which has come up a lot in recent times with X especially.
Well, let me talk about Telegram. This is the problem. So they don't have end-to-end encryption. It's not default. So the problem is,
right? It's like secret chat.
So you have to opt in. You have to open a secret chat, and it's like 4 or 5 steps. Anybody that uses smartphones know that if there's more than one tap involved in like any act, it's just not. No, seriously, right?
Oh, it's true.
Like,
you're not gonna.
Mobile activity.
I don't think I've used it. Yeah.
Is 1 or 2 taps. If it's more than 2 taps, it's never gonna happen. And that's basically, to open a Telegram secret chat, you got to do like 4 or 5 times, and there's all these rules. You gotta really want
it, you know. You got to you got to get to those taps. Yeah,
you gotta really want it. No, but you got.
I mean, it's quite a funny thing to imagine. Someone's there, just like, all right, I'm gonna go for these 4 taps to get there.
Also, both people have to be online. It's not like I can open one and send you like an asynchronous one. It's like there's a lot of friction. Yeah, so you have to ask yourself, why is it that it's so much friction to have end-to-end encryption on Telegram? Even though Pavel and his brother and their team, because he co-founded Telegram with his brother, they're happy to have this idea that Telegram is encrypted. It's like safe chat. Like that is another bit of controversy here, where it's actually not safe in the way that a Signal or WhatsApp or iMessage.
I was just going to ask really quick, because you said Signal, because WhatsApp is powered by Signal, I think, right? Like
they use their encryption. They
use their encryption. So, but by default, those are already end-to-end. So those are the equivalent of secret chat on Telegram.
Exactly. But this is where it gets interesting.
Okay.
What are 2 things that are on Telegram that are very big, that have helped its adoption? We have one. Groups? It's a group chat.
Yeah, like
you can do group chats up to 200,000 users on Telegram.
Oh, wow.
And then you have channels, which is basically a social network where a person with a big profile can broadcast to millions of people, right?
Yeah.
Now, this is where it gets interesting. You can't have end-to-end encryption, or it's very difficult with 200,000 people in a group. I'll give you an example. Do you know how many people you can have in a single iMessage? I think it's 32. It's because every time you send a message, each communication is encrypted. So it's actually technologically very difficult.
You're saying just in terms of load and just to actually technically do it and at that speed, make sure everything's done.
And if you got 30 employees, it's not going to be the easiest thing.
You got to choose your battles.
Exactly. So Signal's actually quite a small team too, but they built their product from the ground up with end-to-end encryption in mind. So their entire focus and that's why it hasn't had as much adoption, right?
So, Tron, do you know much about because didn't WhatsApp also release something like broadcast channels or the equivalent of that?
Yeah, so WhatsApp has that, but
are those end-to-end encrypted as well?
I don't know there's no chance it's end-to-end at the volume of 200,000. Yeah, it's just not, right? But that's also why it took WhatsApp a while to get there, and people were quite critical of WhatsApp for not doing that. So this Telegram having these massive groups and these broadcast channels, which can go to millions of people, like one to many, it helped them grow, right? Because I don't use Signal, for example. I don't use it a ton. I'll use it every now and then. If, like you're joking about, if you're really thirsty for the end-to-end encryption chat, you might hit somebody up on Signal. But I'll jump on, I remember actually starting Telegram, getting in because you'd open a group for NIA, for the non-investment advice. And so these groups, we got into these chats and these groups, these broadcast channels, there were huge adoption for Telegram, right? And then, now we can get into some of the things. So a lot of crypto scams happen on Telegram because these channels and these groups, and it goes to the question of moderation. But now let me tie two things together. You had mentioned moderation at the top. This is what it sounds like France is coming down on Pavel Durov on right now. By the time this podcast comes out, they might have released him already. He's also a UAE citizen. I just saw a letter from the UAE consulate. They're like, listen, he's a citizen of our country too. We want answers. Russia's government has done the same thing. And then people were kind of questioning. And then we can talk about it at the end. It's like, what is his relationship with Russia right now? And then, because that muddies the water, right? It's like, once you hear that, you're like, oh, this guy's a bad guy. And then the question about the moderation now comes in. So the end-to-end encryption is not the default on Telegram. 90% of it is unencrypted. I got to find this article, but somebody wrote about Telegram and compared it to BlackBerry, actually. So a big problem that BlackBerry had was that with the governments was you would have with BBM, you remember BlackBerry Messenger? They had very secure service, right? But the super secure version of BBM was built on-prem enterprise style. And then a corporation that would have tens of thousands of BlackBerry phones, they'd have the safety on-prem. But then some other BBM, just consumers, would not have the same level of safety. So what was happening was, if you don't have the full security as default, like this end-to-end encryption, what happens is the information can be seen on the servers. There's plain text records right now of our chats and of Telegram. They're just on servers right now.
But not WhatsApp, interestingly.
No WhatsApp. So okay. Pavel Durov says that the way they do protection for security, if it's not end-to-end encrypted, is that they're distributed these conversations across different servers around the world. But some people are like, we don't know. That's just not as good as end-to-end encryption, right? But the whole point being, if you have this information and it's on servers and it's accessible, now governments can apply pressure, right? So, and you brought up Moxie Marlinspike. So he's a founder of Signal. He had a very interesting tweet yesterday. He goes, you understand that Pavel Durov and Telegram, they have plain text records of all these chats. And you know that Emmanuel Macron has been using Telegram for many years now. Is this a vehicle they're using to make sure those conversations are scrubbed? No, but seriously, right?
Yeah, that's interesting.
What is going on now? So let me end with this, and I'll throw to your ball in your court. Any follow-up thoughts is the mechanism with which Telegram was able to grow to almost 1 billion users was to have these channels, have these groups, was that they did not have end-to-end encryption by default. They had their encryption technology was that they would take the conversations and break them up across different servers. People in the cryptography space do not think that's adequate. But because they had that, the non-default end-to-end encryption, they're able to grow faster. But now the governments can come after them. The same way, actually, let me tie up my BlackBerry thought, was that BlackBerry got a lot of pressure from governments because certain governments wanted access to BlackBerry conversations, because they knew that in some instances, BlackBerry was not fully encrypting or hiding the convos because of this weird split that BlackBerry had between enterprise and consumer. So when you try to have it both ways, which is effectively what's going on here, where you have this perception of being encrypted, but you're really not, that's helping you grow. Well, now the other part of the hammer is people in power know that you have certain records, they're going to hit you up. So any thoughts on that?
No, I think you described it really well. I think the interesting thing, as we've been speaking, and in the last 24 hours, is Mark Zuckerberg was trending on X on Twitter, and the reason is a lot of people are talking about him coming out and kind of admitting to the fact that he had been pressured to do XYZ and kind of collaborate with Biden administration on some of those things, and how he's kind of getting ahead. Apparently, there's talk about a whistleblower or something like that, and he's been trying to get ahead of that.
So that's why
that's what people are saying. Who knows? This is all just kind of hearsay at the moment. But yeah, I think there's a very interesting. I guess for me, not knowing a lot about encryption and all of these different products, I've always just thought, without looking into it today, that Telegram was the most encrypted, and it turns out WhatsApp, which is what I mostly use anyway, is actually more heavily encrypted. I guess people didn't trust WhatsApp as much because it's, a lot of people in crypto, for example, will use Telegram. Like, I've even met people and they're like, hey, add me on Telegram.
Right? That's the thing. They're like, I don't trust Zuck.
But interestingly here, Telegram actually has, by default, everything's kind of stored. And honestly, my take on this stuff is my personal position. I completely respect people have more on that continuum you said of, more censorship or more privacy. I guess, that's the continuum we're talking about. Or for me, like, I want things to be private, but I also am not that like, oh my God, if mine wasn't end-to-end encrypted, it's the end of the world for me. Because personally, I'm saying, but I do respect that someone might want that. And it's kind of how I'm landing with the content moderation. That's kind of why I brought it up. Is generally speaking, I'm obviously very pro people being able to share what they want to share, but there is a line, and there's a lot of the time the line is legal, right? And that varies in different countries. So again, without knowing France's laws specifically, there may be something specific there that I'm not aware of. Or for example, in Germany, they have laws about things you can and cannot say related to World War II. And they're very, understandably, it's quite black and white. Like if you mention this,
you can go to jail. Yeah,
you go to jail for that. Yeah. Whereas in another country, you could say that. So I think that's where this whole topic has come up quite a bit, even in the last, in the month, all the things that have been going on around the world. There's been a lot of blowback. And I was mentioning X because that's the one that's leading the way in having more of a free speech position. But we've seen the kind of good and bad in some ways of that as well. And I don't think there's a right answer. It's just about where people land, what they care more about, sort of thing.
I would definitely, to answer, to kind of add to your thought about where you fell in that continuum, like the more I see kind of how the governments are using censorship powers and what happened like during COVID. I mean, like literally we just brought it up, right? Is like with Zuckerberg is, man, yeah, I think, this is why the U.S., right? U.S., they're the only country that has really enshrined free speech, right? It's literally the First Amendment. And I think in the long run of, country building,
definitely, yeah,
nation building. No, but this is what I mean.
That's very important.
It's like when this is what I mean is like, I would look at it from the 50,000 foot level. From a nation building perspective, it's pretty clear that having the First Amendment, the ability to say things that may be unpopular in the moment or share new ideas, the good and the bad, you're gonna get the bad, but you're also gonna get the good, and that's how you turn and that's how you deal with situations, right? It's a whole the best disinfectant is sunlight, yeah, or you have to beat a bad argument with a good argument, right? So like that's why with me is like I would want. I'm much more in the let's not move towards this. Which is clearly what Europe's doing, which is heavy. And I'm not suggesting that's what you're saying, but I'm like, between this and what happened in England over the past month with online censorship is like, and again, there are nuanced issues, but that's clearly moving in a direction very much away from let's beat bad ideas with good ideas. It's just like,
I 100% agree on the beat bad ideas with good ideas. I think the England example is a very interesting one, given how much it was so recent and it was outside of what the government was doing, because I agree with that. Like, there was clearly some form of, I don't know.
Well, let's just say they were arresting people for inciting violence online. And and
but
again,
what
we're not
I would
going to
say
go
is
issue to issue.
The flip side, which I think was actually dangerous, was we all kind of have to also accept that two things have happened quite significantly in the last 10, 15 years is obviously the spread of fake news on both sides. and separately, now what's happened in the last few years is the move to the algorithm being primarily focused on interest, not follower-based interest. So you're now blowing up stuff that is it's making things worse in terms of spreading more fake news, more inflammatory stuff. And so in the example of the UK stuff, because I was following that more closely, obviously coming from there was stuff being shared, like the whole riots basically were kicked off by fake news. And again, we're kind of treading into the political stuff, which we normally don't hear. That was lots of misinformation that started off these riots pretty much. And because of that, it was like, even here, being in the US following it, it was quite surprising to see how many people had no idea what was going on, including Elon Musk, who obviously runs a platform and owns a platform. And so that was an example where I could clearly see the downside of that. There needs to be a better solution for moderation, but not censorship. There's a fine line.
You know what it is we talked about community notes a couple months ago, like how it kind of worked. Is like, here's the reality: is like everything you described is true, and the solution has to be an internet scale solution, right? Well, there's two options. True. The solution is straight up government censorship, is what you're like. That's one solution, right? That is one solution. It's like, if we don't like what you're saying, like, we have to have that overhanging threat on you, right? And in Europe, they can do that because they haven't enshrined freedom of speech. The other way is to have an internet speed solution. So community notes will not be perfect, cannot address everything, but that's an internet scale solution to this problem.
And right? I love community notes, but the truth is, when 100 million people see something that's shared by, let's say, Elon Musk,
of course,
then only 1% are going to see the community note. So by then, the damage is done. And that's why I think it was an interesting example, because, you know, so go on.
Well, we could tease. Let me add one layer to.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting discussion. No, for sure.
The other part of it too is government communication mismanagement. Similar to this France situation, there's just, if you're going to move at the speed of internet and everything that you said, how fast it goes, there's got to be way better communication, right? In the sense of, this France thing kind of blew up because it took them 36 hours to say what was going on. And then all these theories fill that information void in the meantime, right? And no, I agree with you. It's this will be a whole episode. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. And so, John, the only thing I'd add is, I think both of them can be something that we care about, keeping free speech and the good ideas, getting rid of bad ideas, and having those discussions open. But also, I do think the idea of misinformation is something that is increasingly important and is spreading further because of the way the algorithms are designed now. And in an election year, all the things that are happening everywhere, I think that's making things worse. And I think both of them are important. I don't think it's either or. Like, you can only have pure free speech and anything goes, and there is no control at all. There's also like laws, like we said. So I do think there's, like, inciting violence, for example, is not something you're allowed to do, right? And there's certain things you can't do in public. You can't just go stand on the street and, incite violence and stuff like that. So I think there is a fine line between those two things, and I think they're both important. So that's kind of my take on it.
No, absolutely, man. And the last thought I'd add on the Telegram situation is still obviously developing. The thought I wanted to add to finish this up was about encryption itself, and end-to-end encryption doesn't actually fully secure yourself either, right? Because the signal still has to give, like, metadata to. Like, the government wants metadata, or WhatsApp wants metadata. And what's metadata? It's like, who's sending what to who at what time, right? Those things can still happen. You might not know the actual content.
Is it like a phone number or like some whatever profile?
Like those things still exist, right? So the government could put the squeeze on people. And, like, I'll give the best example I heard was from was during the whole Edward Snowden thing, and it's just the idea of, like, okay, imagine it's 1776. You're looking at communications between, like, the American revolutionaries, right? It's like Paul Revere and George Washington are sending telegrams to each other. You don't know, but it's like you don't know what's in those telegrams, but they're sending telegrams that are arriving at 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning between this network of guys. You can piece together, something's popping off,
something's
right?
about to pop off, yeah.
So, like, what I mean by that is, like, just because you can't get the source of the information, there's still a lot to be gleaned from metadata. And the last thought I'll end on the Pavel Durov stuff is, you mentioned the Tucker Carlson interview. I would highly recommend people to watch. That's only an hour.
It was really good, yeah.
But
he's sitting on some Bitcoin too, by the way.
He's caked. I mean, his net worth, Forbes put it at $10 billion. He owns Telegram, almost the majority of it.
Pretty much, yeah.
And but he, based on the 2014, him having to give up VK, his social network in Russia, and Telegram, we mentioned a lot of negative stuff. A lot of positive stuff had happened on it too as a communication platform, right? It was used during Hong Kong.
And group chat, bro. There we go. That's source of a lot of fun. It's
like, when people talk about, you just have to accept there's things that you will choose to be good or bad on both sides happening, right? It's like, a lot of the Russian and Ukraine war is being fought literally on Telegram right now, used as a communication medium. But then, however you feel about that, just also know that different protests around the world have also used Telegram as a way to organize. So like, Telegram is a communication medium. The entire human experience is going to happen on it. But then it comes to the question of, is zero touch too little, right? Because I think that is the biggest criticism against it. It's actually two tiers. You had mentioned how you thought Telegram before her chat was fully encrypted, right? Like that speaks to it. It's like there was this marketing perception of it, which is not actually reflected in how it's done. And that's come back to bite Pavel Durov in this instance, because the governments are like, well, we know we can look at the information, so now we're going to put the squeeze on. I think it's quite escalatory. I don't, unless France reveals the full scope of what it is. I mean, I would expect them to be out. And yeah.
Yeah, no, that was a great breakdown. Good we did a deep dive. The last thing I was going to say was on the plane, I was watching, there was a Bloomberg FTX documentary. Did you ever see this? It was a lot of your old colleagues at Bloomberg.
FTX on the way.
Did you ever see it? To be honest, I didn't actually finish it, but I was halfway through and I was like, I need a break from I was naturally wanting to listen to it, but I needed a break from that sort of stuff. And,
was it good?
It was decent. It was just kind of like this, we covered it on the pod so much and we kind of lived through it, reading it all and stuff. So you kind of knew a lot of it. But one of the things it kind of reminded me of was in that era, where there's a parallel to Telegram here, is we were celebrating, look at this small, lean team. Do you remember when FTX was on top of the world? Everyone was like, oh man, look how, what are all these big companies doing with so many people? And now we see, well, like they've got a whole team clamping down on this stuff. And obviously there's lots of PMs chilling on rooftops too, like, don't get me wrong. But there's reasons people underestimate what it takes to run a big company.
No, I love how you brought that up though. Is like, there's a reason why banks have so many employees. Do you know how large the compliance departments are at banks?
Completely.
No, but that's it, right? Guess what? FTX has no compliance department.
Well,
there's a lot of money laundering
expenses
and
on Intuit. What's it called? QuickBooks. Yeah. I mean, that's what I mean. So that was the only thing I said here is I think there is this thing, especially coming from our world of like the tech, centric world. Rightfully so, you can celebrate the leanness of small teams and startups, but there's a stage where you kind of get to a point where you're like, well, we actually need to stop breaking things and actually have some professional stuff go down. And that's all the boring stuff I hate personally, but there's reasons, there's compliance teams is for that. So anyway, really good discussion. Should we talk about the podcast acquisitions real quick? I think there's, you tweeted this out, but I'll just share. So Alex Cooper, Call of Daddy, signed a $125 million deal with SiriusXM.
I heard 100, but it's 100 to 125.
Okay. Maybe there's add-ons like football deals, like appearance fees and stuff like that. But so it's literally the last few days of the transfer window. So it's very much in my head, that correlation there. And then Travis Kelce and his brother. Sorry, I forgot his brother's name. I don't follow it as much. What's his brother's name? Oh, Jason and Travis Kelce.
Yeah, In the Heights podcast, dude. This thing's been around for like 2 years. That's
wild. Yeah,
listen,
and obviously
when you're dating Taylor Swift, it changes the profile.
And it's smart. I mean, it's a great way to. I'm thinking of. I don't know why I'm thinking of this, but the way the YouTubers started doing boxing matches. It's like, that's where there's a way to monetize.
Logan and Jake Paul. Yeah.
And now, like, good for them. Like, they're going to have to, obviously he's still playing right now, right? So, but he's going to not be playing in a few years. So,
he's going to be, I've heard people say that he's the next The Rock. Like, he will reach that level of, for example, he has a film. He's going to star in a film in the next 18 months, I believe. So,
but I do want to bring up
a monster.
Yeah, and so that was with Wondery, owned by Amazon, I think, right?
Yeah.
Wondery. And so you tweeted this out here. You basically said the podcast power law, top 25 shows account for 50% of US listens, massive deals in the past year. I'm just going to actually share the screen because there's some...
Yeah, just say the massive. It's crazy.
Really cool to see. And I think obviously we've been doing the pod. We know we follow media stuff quite a bit. Share screen.
I'll give people some context here. So I'll read through this. Podcast power laws. The top 25 shows in America account for 50% of all listens. And here are the deals that happened in the past year. And I want you to keep these deal numbers in mind because podcasts, which we will discuss shortly, they went through a bit of a slump because Spotify had gone so hard and thrown so much money at it that they created like a high expectations, didn't really pan out. But Rogan signed a $250 million deal with Spotify, but he's number one on the charts right now. It does about 12 million plus downloads an episode. Go ahead.
And I was just going to really quickly on that one, that is no longer exclusive in terms of you can now listen to on other podcast players and on YouTube, which is key, which I think he's done incredibly well to basically get the bag twice. And now he's everywhere. I mean, I can imagine his show has grown significantly.
We'll talk about why Spotify re-upped it. They gave him 50 million more, but it isn't exclusive. I'll tease it right now. It's because Spotify is allowed to sell ads across all of his inventory. That's great. Wherever he is.
It's not like everyone wins, basically.
Yeah, everyone wins. But we'll talk about that because Spotify's entry into the podcast space, super interesting story. Okay, New Heights with Jason and Travis Kelce. That's number 4 in the world right now. This is a Q1 2024 ranking from Edison Research. So podcast numbers, as Bilal knows, they're not 100%, but this is like
and this is US only, which is also
US only. Caller
Daddy.
Wish
they did a global
Alice
one
Cooper.
because I bet Joe Rogan does more than twice the size of that.
Oh yeah, you're right. Globally, because of these names, he's the one that would travel. SiriusXM paid $100 million to Caller Daddy Alex Cooper. We should talk about that too because of how they kind of they started the whole movement of paying one celebrity a crazy bag because they pay Howard Stern $100 million plus a year. So I read somewhere that if Howard Stern left SiriusXM, where he's been for 2 decades, they would lose 15% of their subscriber base. So that gives you an idea of the single individual, how much leverage you have, power laws. And then Smartless with Jason Bateman, Sean Hayes, and Will Arnett. I haven't heard a single episode of Smartless.
Me too, but I know it's like massive. A podcast. Yeah. People love it, and I'm just reading out a few. Obviously, there's Crime
here's the
Junkie,
top 10. Why don't
Daily.
you just read through the top 10?
Yeah, we got Joe Rogan, Crime Junkie, The Daily, obviously Daily New York Times, very popular. Yeah. New Heights to Jason and Travis Kelce, Dateline NBC, This American Life, OGs, Caller Daddy, Smartless, Morbid. I've never listened to that. Stuff You Should Know is an OG huge podcast as well.
Yeah,
Met those guys one really like they're old school, very very good. One of my missus, one of her best friends, came all the way into the city just to go to an event for this. That's like how much people love it. And then we Club Shay Shay, another one.
Shannon Sharp.
Then our boy Theo Vaughn, number 12. I've seen him go all the way up to like number 5, 6 in different rankings. He's been
after the Trump interview, he's probably.
And also the other thing here is, I wonder if they're including YouTube or not.
Great question. I'm not sure
because that's if they're not. That's more than half the views for some of these guys. And then Ben Shapiro Show, Mr. Ballin Podcast, Bad Friends with Andrew Santino, Bobby Lee. So yeah, really, lots of ones people would have heard of. And it was really just to call out that there's a second kind of wave of these deals happening. It seems to be, a lot of those deals were 2-3 years and now we're hitting that renewal. And I think what's interesting is they're not, both of them are not exclusive to Spotify anymore. Obviously, Alice Cooper, not all, and Joe, she's not on there all. But
literally, so for people who don't know, Alice Cooper had signed a $60 million deal with Spotify in 2020. Here's the crazy thing. Dude, she was unemployed in 2018.
It's
unemployed.
Incredible. Amazing story.
She's super
Good for her,
talented,
man.
though. She is super talented, by the way. So
Yeah, she edited all
edit.
her podcasts herself.
Yeah.
I remember
Dude,
that.
she'd
Maybe
edit,
she still does, honestly.
She
might
said
be
she
one of
spent
those.
10 hours an episode editing, and like when she was coming up, like Call Her Daddy, people don't know. It started with her and a co-host, Sophia. I forgot Sophia's last name, but
No, I forgot.
But anyways, it was like locker room talk for girls. That was the pitch, right? A lot of sex talk, a lot of datings talk. But similar to Howard Stern was the shock jock. I don't know if you guys remember in the 90s. Howard Stern used to have Jenna Jameson come on into the studio, and she'd ride a Symbian machine. If you don't know what a Symbian machine is, you Google that. And she would ride it and be on the radio.
We just lost all our listeners.
We just lost our listeners.
Distracted for the next 12 minutes.
This was Howard Stern back in the day. But then now he's a big celebrity interview guy. That's basically what happened with Alice Cooper. If you don't know about Alice Cooper, Google this, Gluck Gluck 9000. That's what she became famous for. I'm not going to say anything more. Google that. But then now she does celebrity interviews. I'll actually throw something out. Listen to her interview, Dave Portnoy, in May at the Kentucky Derby.
I think I heard that one. Because I don't actually listen to a pod, but I listened to that one because
exactly. That was the first time they had chat since she left Barstool. For people who don't know, she signed with Barstool.
That's why I was interested to hear what the backstory was. And I will say, in this deal, it looks like it's her flagship show and the Unworld Podcast Network.
She built a podcast
which she built a network, which is incredibly smart. So good. I mean, she's a baller. She's
for people that don't
it.
know, Unwell is she picked young influencers from TikTok and gave them podcasts. Really smart, because she has that under 30 demo on lock. So
it's kind of like if Joe Rogan had done. I mean, obviously Joe Rogan didn't ever want to do this and didn't need to do it. But think of how many people came out of his show that blew up because of it.
He put people
Theo
on,
Von
right? Eric
was already
Weinstein,
doing it, I
Theo
think, but
Von.
he really went supernova.
Lex Friedman.
What was the other one? The other intellectual dude? What's
Eric
his
Weinstein.
name? Eric Weinstein, exactly. Maybe you just said that name and I missed it. But
well, Bilal, let me actually walk through Alice Cooper's deals, because I'll tell you what's interesting. We talked about Spotify, right? In 2019, Spotify basically decided, we've talked about this in the past, but let me just run through it super quickly. Spotify's business in 2019 was obviously primarily songs, unlimited songs. There's a freemium tier where you can listen, but then you get hit with ads. And then the majority of the business is built around subscription, right? But as we've discussed on this show, what is the problem with the music-only business model, the song-only business model for Spotify? They have to pay 60 to 70% of every dollar that comes in the door to the music labels. So there's no benefits of scale. It doesn't matter how big Spotify got, they couldn't amortize those costs across their user base because they had to pay every 60 to 70 cents every dollar out. So they're like, okay, in 2019, Daniel Ek and his team, Daniel Ek, the founder and CEO of Spotify, is like, we gotta do podcasts, something we can own.
They wanted to own the ear. Like that's basically how I had it described.
They called it the ear pie, right? It's like so. They've
got audiobooks too. That's another
thing. They do got
thing
audiobooks now,
too.
And spent over $1 billion on podcast technology and podcast content. So you mentioned exclusive deal with Joe Rogan, exclusive deal with Alice Cooper. They bought The Ringer, which has a massive podcast network. Bill Simmons.
They bought Anchor.
But they bought Gimlet. So Gimlet, what is Anchor? Podcast.
Anchor, I think, was mostly just podcast hosting, but now I don't use it. But now, for example, if you want to put video on Spotify, I think you have to use that as a host. Whereas previously, there's hundreds of hosts, but there's like 5 or 10 really big ones that people have been using. We don't use it. But that because a lot of people don't realize, like on YouTube, you just upload to youtube.com and everyone can watch your video. For podcasts, because it goes on Spotify, Podcast, Overcast, and 100 different players, you need a centralized host. So that's kind of what it acts as for them.
No, perfect. Anchor, the technology. So here's the technology side of the investment. Megaphone, which is advertising. Advertising analytics like Chartable and stuff. Like I don't know if Chartable is the right name, but they basically built a stack. They want to attract users to the platform to listen to podcasts with these exclusive deals, and then they wanted to build a platform where anybody can launch a podcast, monetize them, doing ads, and which is what they've basically done, right? So if you listen to a podcast on Spotify now, ad placements, and they want to do basically what we talked about, what Bilal kind of Bilal's background and expertise is like they want to do like insertable ads, right? Is like, what type of content do you do? We're just gonna insert for you into a podcast.
And they wanted to make it more like programmatic, it's called. So it's more like 2024 versus right now. Most podcast ads are still like 2002.
Like you're emailing people. Here's a read. Send me money via
Literally,
Venmo or Zelle.
Here's a Word doc. Read it out. And then you read it out. Send it for a review. It's stupid. It's more like a radio style ad buy. And so the two big players are obviously Spotify, and then there's another company from also I think Sweden called Acast, which is really big in Europe. And now you'll hear a lot of podcasts, which we actually use, but you can basically create an insertion point and say, here's an ad slot, and it will just insert an ad for you.
Oh, it'll insert for you. Side. Wow.
Yeah. We're eligible to do it. We just haven't done it, but we should try it out at some point just to see how it goes. But that's basically.
Hold on, let me fast forward. Give you so we talked about the overview, and something we haven't mentioned is Apple, right? So Apple invented the podcast format essentially, and the word podcast is literally a combination of iPod and broadcast. And Apple was the largest podcast player up until 2019 when Spotify made the decision to make this push into podcast. But people are wondering, why did Apple just let this industry die in the vine? Well, the entire podcast industry is worth like $10 billion. Apple made $400 billion last year. So even if Apple owned the entire podcast industry, right? If they got every ad revenue dollar, it would not be a drop. It wouldn't be a drop in the bucket for them. So they didn't care from the monetization side, which makes sense. But the other thing though that they might have made a mistake on is a big part of podcasts. If you don't allow monetization, the way that Spotify has built it, right? It's like if you have a popular podcast on Spotify, you're adding all these things that Bilal talked about, programmatically sell ads. Because Apple didn't do that, it actually made them less of a place that creators wanted to kind of push people to and make that the platform. So Apple, I mean, on the revenue side didn't matter, but they're also, you want people using the iPhone, right?
Yeah, they've lost a little bit of that share.
Well, now they're third. They're now the third biggest.
Oh, really?
Podcast.
What's number two?
YouTube is number one.
Oh, YouTube number one. Yeah, technically, yeah.
So to wrap up the Spotify thing, they spent all this money, and we didn't even mention some of the big L's they took. First of all, they had to fire a bunch of people at Gimlet. I think the Ringer took a bunch of layoffs. I think the podcast union in general layoff. Dawn Ostroff was brought in to run their podcast unit. She was fired or resigned, and she had tried to do stuff like bring in, super famous people. Barack Obama had a podcast, didn't last very long. He had one with Bruce Springsteen, dude. Bruce Springsteen and Obama podcast didn't work. That speaks to the type of money that was being thrown around.
Yeah, it's not just the names. That's the thing. Yeah.
So the famous one was Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. They're given $20 million to record 10 episodes and bounced. And Bill Simmons, who runs the monetization innovation for podcasts, although his contract's coming up at Spotify, he had really bad things to say about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle in terms of professionalism. And then the last thing I'll add is, so where are we now? Spotify has really pulled back on their spending. They're no longer just fucking shooting money everywhere, right? That's why Alex Cooper was allowed to be, or that's why Alex Cooper left to go to Sirius. Sirius is in a very different spot. Dave Portnoy actually talked about when Alex Cooper left Barstool to go to Spotify, he brought up a great point. He's like, you have to see where a person is in their career. And some people are just so big. You get so big to a point where there's only 2 or 3 places that can take you, right? So he basically said, if Barstool had given her a $60 million deal, which is what Spotify did in 2021, everything would have had to work out perfectly for them to basically break even.
Yeah, come close to even making
come
money
close
on that.
But for Spotify, at that time, they're just doing a gold rush. They're doing a land grab. They'll pay anything to do that, right? And it might not have worked out on the economic side, directly, one for one. Did she sell $60 million worth of ads? Did she get $60 million worth of subscribers? Maybe, maybe not. But it was just that point, the strategy, where it worked for her. And then now, Sirius, here's the interesting part. She knew she's going to get a bigger deal. Howard Stern's contract is up next year. So Sirius is like, oh man, every time Howard Stern's contract comes up, they have a battle with Howard Stern on his contract because they're paying $100 million a year. And he's worth it today. He's 66 years old though. But this is why Sirius also paid Smartless. We mentioned Smartless, the podcast, big celebrity interview podcast. I've listened to 0 episodes, but it's huge, right? And they paid $100 million for SmartList. It sounds like they want some negotiating leverage. So the whole point I'm bringing all that up is Alice Cooper, basically, her timing has been unbelievable.
Yeah, perfect.
She's coming up for renewal. Her contract is up. Every single time somebody needs to throw a bag, and she's just waiting there.
Yeah, good for her, man. And I also think on the Rogan side, he cashed in when he's top of the world, already making lots of money, but then you get that big lump sum in. And I will say he was already massive, obviously the biggest, but then Spotify makes him the poster child, puts him on every podcast app, a page, promotes him.
He must have gained so many listeners
on Spotify. And then now he's gone back. Like, honestly, I used to listen to his pod so much. And when he went on Spotify, I probably cut it by 5 times. Like,
dude, I stopped listening. You're right. Yeah. We talked about this. None of the episodes showed up.
I don't use Spotify for podcasts. And it's so weird because it seems like, an easy switch. But when you're used to using a dedicated podcast app, that's where I go to listen to stuff for an hour plus. Spotify, I listen to music. And for me to keep switching, it just doesn't work for me personally. And now he's back everywhere. I listen to his pod very regularly again. It's kind of interesting. It's just in my feed. It's like the 5 clicks we talked about. This is the equivalent of 5 clicks on the Telegram secret chat. It's like now it's in my face. I'm ready to listen. I know we're running out of time here. Do you want to just wrap up one last thing on the Costco stuff or Oasis? Or I guess we talked about Oasis already. It was kind of
I'll wrap up super quickly with the Spotify music economics.
Perfect.
I'll give you an example of what they're doing now. So the contract with Rogan, no longer exclusive, but we mentioned they get to sell ads across his network. They might be able to make back the $250 million, right? And then I'll give you an example of a new type of contract that's happening is with Trevor Noah, comedian, super popular comedian, a former host of The Daily Show. Trevor's contract was only $4 million guaranteed, and Spotify got to recoup their investment, the $4 million, against his ads, at which point, once that $4 million is recouped, it's 50-50 moving forward. So that gives you an idea of how industry's kind of changing. Spotify's changing its approach. And then let's throw in the Costco Japan. I can just turbo through this fun fact fan. So anybody, let's start with, did you see the visual, Bilal, of what happened in Japan?
I haven't. No, what's going on?
Dude, so it opened this weekend in Okinawa. You had mentioned you're familiar with Okinawa, yeah? So take a look at this madness.
Hawaii of Japan. I don't know if people like that, but if they would like that, but it's a beautiful place apparently.
Well, why is it called the Hawaii? Yeah, why is it called the Hawaii of Japan?
I think just the climate and the island vibe. I don't know much about it.
The U.S. military. There's a big U.S. military presence.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
You're like not
look
wrong.
At this line. Look at this. Yeah.
Damn, no way. Wow.
Bro,
this is in Japan.
It was Okinawa, Japan. It was a 5-hour line.
Yeah.
Just to get into the parking lot. And there's another 3 hours. So I'm going to turbo through this, but there's 30.
The Costco pull is real, man.
Yeah,
people want that hot dog.
While we are recording this, Tuesday morning, Costco just hit an all-time high. So Costco, and people that don't know, is Costco upped their membership fee next week. So if you have a Costco membership in North America, it went from $65 a year for the gold to $60 to $65 on the gold, and then the business is $120 to $130. So yeah, it's a $400 billion company now. Costco is the 3rd largest retail in the world after Amazon and Walmart. Now, the crazy thing about Costco Japan, I'm just going to turbo through it. They got there in 1999. Interesting thing about Japan is a lot of foreign brands don't do very well in Costco. So the question is, why is there this massive lineup outside of Costco in Okinawa? So Costco actually does a couple of things that are very interesting and unique to Japan for the Japanese market. Japan does love foreign items, but they like it in a certain way. Not a lot of places in Japan, because of the nature of the city, super dense populations that rely on public transportation, right? Like Tokyo, train. Dude, you're going to train to Costco and walk out. Like, you need a minivan, right?
No, that's hilarious, yeah.
But this is what's crazy is like, but Costco's so popular because not a lot of places sell in bulk the way that Costco does, right? In Japan. So that's a unique value prop. The other value prop is that Kirkland is a very popular brand in Costco. I mean, in Japan. It's obviously a very popular brand around the world. So they brought that brand there. Another thing that happens is the prices are crazy. It's because in Japan, a lot of Japan retail relies on middlemen. There's a whole distribution network. Costco famously doesn't deal with middlemen. They like to go direct. So they're able to get some crazy prices and deals that the Japanese love. Yeah, the last note I'll say about Costco Japan is go on YouTube, Google Costco Japan food. It is insane. They have
they must have some bangers.
Bro, imagine the pre-made items that you know what? Let's just finish it. We'll finish this episode. Costco Japan Trung Tifan. We'll finish this episode with a quick video that I found on YouTube, and you can see it on my profile. But here we are. We'll just end it with this. All right. The selection at Costco, their pre-made meals. Bro, look at this. Look at the pre-made meals.
Wow, wait, what is that?
The pork katsu sandwiches.
Jeez, look at that. Have you been to Japan, by the way?
Look at that. Bro, look at that.
That looks...
Look at the selection.
Oh, wow, look at
listeners.
that. Beautiful.
So here's the sushi kits. Look at the sushi kits. These sushi kits, nigiri platters, would cost $100+ in America. You buy them in Japan Costco for $20.
Oh, man.
Look at that.
That is mad. So, Troy, I was going to say, I don't know if you've been to Japan, but have you been to like 7-Eleven there? It's quite famous.
Oh, yes.
That you get like the most banger. You just go in there for $6.
Dude, I spent a week there, and I've eaten exclusively at 7-Eleven.
Yeah, it was so good. It was so good. But so this,
you know
must
what we'll
be
talk about? We'll talk about next
yeah.
week. The largest grocery chain in Canada, or might be even the world, is trying to buy Japan 7-Eleven. But anyways, we'll talk about that.
Wait,
next
what's
week.
that? What's the name of the company?
Couche-Tard. It's a Quebec retailer. Yeah. But we got to wrap up though, listeners.
All right, let's do it. Yeah. And also when we talk about that, I was just reading about this, the connection between Trader Joe's and Aldi in Europe.
Yeah.
I didn't
Aldi
realize
owns
that.
Trader Joe.
Yeah, but there was some history with Aldi, like the fight between the two Aldi brothers or something like that. It's quite interesting. But anyway, all right, let's wrap it there. That was great. Thanks for being everyone. We'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.